Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music, different location YouTuber here. It's always fun. Nothing but Black November. I did this last year, and we came back to my home in California, and I love it here. It's great. I got some tea. It's less cold, still a little cold. I mean, in terms of temperate regions, it's pretty cold. But either way, it's not cold enough for like black metal to be sustainable. So instead, we just have 15 albums of bangers for you guys. And of course, this is nothing but Black Metal November. So I've covered half of the albums so far in the last two parts. If you haven't watched those, go watch those and get some black metal recommendations. But you'll be happy to know that I have more great albums than ever today. Well, actually, technically the same, because I bring up the same amount of great albums every time. I've been replacing the ones that aren't very good this year, and I'm hyped to get to it. And last time we had two albums that weren't great. It was the Craft album and some other album. Actually, it was a great album. Actually, it was Owl Crusher's self-titled record, but the problem was it wasn't Blackened Sludge like I thought it was. So first of all, I'm going to replace that one with an album called Lowered by the band Lowered. This is only on Bandcamp, but it's an EP, but it's about a half hour long. But it is this grimy, just grueling, just crushing sounding sludge with black metal style vocals, but that is not enough to make it black metal. But there are tremolo portions intercut with the sludge. My only actual complaint about it at all really is that it doesn't really have the sludgy pacing that is to intercut and mix with the black metal stuff as much. It's more like a paced out thing that it uses it to be this sort of extreme metal mishmash. But either way, it's really intense, really crushing. I worked out to it and had one of my better workouts I've ever had in my life. Sludge is good for working out too, by the way. And there was another record, which was Craft. And I'm going to replace that with something I can't really pronounce, but I've been listening to a lot of Finnish black metal recently. And this is a Horna's Saro Jesse Arel. It's an hour and a half long, and I considered using it for two whole spots because it's so ungodly long. That is my only complaint about this thing, is it's insanely long, but the riffs on it are all fire. Honestly, Horna is definitely a band I'll have to return to on future years, just in the future in general. Horna is one of the few bands left that I haven't looked at all. Probably the most famous at this point that I haven't looked at all is Marduk, but I'll probably cover it the day after recording this, actually. So now we're on to the next 15, and I'm happy to say I don't have to replace a lot of these, but a couple I will, and I hope this doesn't turn into too much of a gimmick of mine. So the first album we're going to talk about today is a recent release, and this year I haven't been very successful with gauging these. I had the Gravis Teray record. I've picked a couple others that weren't entirely successful, but this one is Psychic Contortions by a little band called Feral Light, and I saw this recommended to me, and I looked it up on Write Your Music, and it had crust punk, blackened sludge, and all this other stuff crammed into this one thing. So I was thinking, wow, this must be pretty special, and I'm thankful to say it's very interesting. It is a Voidhanger release, which is a label from, I believe, Italy that releases a whole bunch of black metal and doom metal stuff. But they're also known for Neptunian Maximalism, if you like that band at all, which I personally love their first album. I haven't really checked out their other stuff. I know they've released more, though. But the first thing is that this atmospheric sludge style really works with the black metal stuff. I'm not getting a lot of the crust. It's not going through as much because the actual production of this is actually relatively decent for black metal. It's a little on the more decent side. Things do tend to glow a little bit, feels a bit warm. So it's meditative as atmospheric sludge typically is, and it's got that really grinding nature that really works in this little subgenre, but it's got that really hard to hit but necessary nature of that really classic black metal passion that only shows up on so many albums nowadays. And it's that which really carries this thing ahead of its contemporaries. And it's hard calling it crust punk because it actually has this mastodon style of like riff city going on right here. Not riff salad. It's not just a bunch of random riffs thrown at you, but they stack and layer upon each other in this really rhythmic way that shows a little bit of prowess, a little bit of progressive influence here and there. But it's not like, oh, here's some random jazz solo. Here's this thing. This song's 20 minutes long. It's not obnoxious at all. Works perfectly well. It's grim. It's dark. And of course, the riffs go crazy. So if you want something that's hard hitting and punchy, if you miss good classic old Mastodon, but you want something blackened, go for this. So it's great. I'm very happy to say. And up next is Rotting Christ's Thy Mighty Contract, an album that they're trying to forget, and for some reason a lot of black metal fans are trying to forget. Here's what I like about this album. It's like blackened heavy metal, but not at all like GBK. It's blackened heavy metal in the way that, like, if you like Metallica's riffs, if you like any really heavy metal band that just knows how to stack riffs upon each other and have a little bit of syncopation and hookiness to them, then Rotting Christ is your band. Especially on this album here, which is funny because they used to be grindcore before this thing. So I was expecting on this one for it to be especially grimy and fast and hard hitting. And it has those moments. Don't get it twisted. You know, there's blast beats, there's syncopations, there's really fast songs. But here you get a really well thought out and well drawn out record here. And it's actually inspired me to kind of plan a project where I would actually make my own intro to black metal chart, which no one makes. They just basically say, here's 30 classic black metal albums, go. But this one would be an excellent way to get into black metal if you are into heavy metal or Metallica or any of those bands. Certainly a better entry point than Leviathan. Not dissing Leviathan. It's one of the best black metal bands ever. But, you know, Rotting Christ is a good way to get into it. But it's lightly symphonic, which is kind of cool, but it doesn't overdo it. The vocals are nice and raspy. You know, it's not really fun, but, you know, it hits pretty hard. And it's got really nice dynamics that black metal just doesn't always use. You know, it's got different volumes. It's got different speeds. It's kind of an eclectic record here. And it's actually just the quality of the songwriting and the quality of the riffs that takes this thing ahead of any of its contemporaries at the time. It's a Greek metal classic, especially in terms of black metal, so I gotta give this thing a great. And up next, I got a popular band's less popular pick, Immortals Battles in the North. I know some of you are probably groaning. You're like, oh, that one's actually still decently popular. It's like top 5 Immortal, and that's for a reason. It's amazing. If you want the sort of battle tendency stuff of late period Immortal, but you want the riff crush fest that is Pure Holocaust, this follows Pure Holocaust. It's like a year or two later, and it's absolutely wonderful. This features the really long track Blashirk Mighty Raven Dark, which has some nice acoustic parts, but I think the real thing that you want here is the fact that every song is just punching you in the face. It's a really intense album, as early Immortal tends to be post their debut, I think. Because I don't love that album, but this one I do. They really shows that they hit their stride on Pure Holocaust, and it's not a fluke. Also, just straight up, some of Abbott's best vocals. It might be his best vocals in the whole discography. He's got this really nice growling tone to him, more yelly than ever before. It's a bit like the first album. So, you know, you take pretty much the best part of the first album and put it on this later album, and you've got nothing but bangers. This thing is great. And the bangers keep on rolling with Behexing with By the Blessing of Satan. If you want a Finnish version of something that's evil and able to combat De Mysteries Dom Satanas by Mayhem, yet being a little more raw on the raw side, then this is your deal here. This album is nothing but amazing. Does it reinvent the wheel in any way? Not in particular, but it's really the atmosphere that this thing lays down for you. This absolutely evil, crushing, slightly vampiric, a little bit on the raw side type of feeling it goes for, that it just pummels you. It's evil, it's loud, it's very, very thrashy. The song Black Metal Baptism has riffs for days. The vocals are insanely wretched and honestly a huge highlight. It's entirely impressive, it's cult, it's brimming with quality, it's all bangers. This thing is not only great, but I would put it up with some of the best I've listed on this chart so far, up with your Lurkers of Chalice and up with your Sun. It's truly something you don't want to ignore. But honestly, if you look at Finnish black metal in general, that is a scene that is amongst the best. It's up there with Norway, it's up there with Poland, and it's up there with America. But America's kind of cheating because America's a big, big country. So Finland, bang for your buck. Behexen, great album. And after that, we have an album from China. This is Zuriach's After Image of Autumn, and this is a re-listen I decided to do because I totally forgot what it sounded like. People say it's depressive black metal. Don't really get that. It's lightly depressive, but not super so. And it's a lot more on the symphonic and atmospheric sides. And one thing I can compare it to, because I covered it early on this chart, is Druth, or Drutk, or whatever you want to pronounce the band as. But it's totally different. The riffing style is a lot more complex. The symphonic stuff is a lot more separated. And it sounds actually quite dungeon synth-esque in timbre. but it's a lot of like string samples and stuff like that that actually doesn't pull you too out of the experience here. It's not like really blasted out horns. The track God of Scotch Mist is a really special one. It's one of the earliest on the album, and the guitar hits after all this dungeon synth stuff going on, and it hits like a truck. In terms of symphonic stuff, it's probably about as good as the second song off of that Summoning Stronghold, going into Long Lost Where No Pathway Goes. That kind of quality transition, but I think it's probably even better here. I don't think it's as well mixed together as Droot, because Droot, what they do is like the symphonic stuff is all interwoven, and you got all these extra instruments that really make it this lush sound that's honestly kind of indescribable. But Zuriach, it's like these winding passages that go into symphonic sections and different riffs, and it's very well laid out. It's a bit linear, but it works very well. It's very emotional. But hey, if you want a dungeon synth black metal album that like doesn't suck, you know, it's great. So check out Zuriach. And up next, we have Altar of Plagues with White Tomb. I wanted to make sure I wasn't covering an Altar of Plagues record that had too much black gaze going on. So this one is strictly black metal, but it's a lot more post metal. Of course, the vocals are black metal. There's tremolo riffs, but it stretches out. It's really lengthy. It's post-metal climax and stuff, which this is a classic. Literally nothing is wrong with this idea that works exceptionally. I mean, could I do it? Probably. I could probably make an 8-minute post-metal black metal song with some homies and it'd sound amazing. But I'm happy to say that White Tomb has an exceptional execution. The production is very satisfying. It's not raw at all. So I'm going to say straight up before I continue on this record, it is not appealing in a cult way. It's not appealing in terms of any traditional black metal. In fact, if I don't even want to call it an amazing black metal album, it is an amazing album, but it does not have the appeal that black metal is known for. And black metal, you can go into a million different routes. You know, you can go evil, depressing. You know, you could totally make it symphonic. You can make it electronic drums for whatever reason, but all the appeal normally has something grim, something emotional, something that you just sit with. But the appeal for this album is more of like a lush kind of thing, even though it's not black gaze. The tone is still gritty, tremolo, rough around the edges. It's a huge monolith of an album, being 4 songs, 50 minutes, all these things about 10 minutes plus in length. And it really develops and builds, and the repetition is a little bit less, as instead you have the sort of crescendo core ideas. Not that it's executed poorly, it's executed quite well. Its sort of monotony is different from the typical black metal riff. You get more of the atmo riffs that build in volume, and it turns into this monolith of sound rather than this thing to dwell on. So different appeal, I'll give you that, but it still feels massive. And for it feeling so massive, it does have some appeal, and that appeal is for me, so it's great. So we got a good streak of greats there. Up next is Cultes de Gules with Henbane. This is a Blackened Doom record, and it doesn't even get to Blackened Doom until a song and a half in, so I was pretty upset with that. But also you get some fun style playing that kind of throws you out of the experience, to be honest. This is actually a Polish black metal band, but there's a lot better than this, because this thing, it tries to be like this campy, weird experience, and it doesn't really work. The riffs, they try to be catchy in a way that doesn't appeal with black metal riffs typically. Black metal riffs are pretty rarely catchy, but it's always because they have some level of dissonance that is just so hard to match. And it really captures a sort of emotion here. It doesn't try to go the stoner doom route of being an earworm in a really quick way. So it's kind of just like different in that regard. But either way, I don't think it builds any atmosphere at all. But the biggest crime of this whole album are these weird folk bits that don't match at all. So I don't want to dwell on this any further. I'm going to give it an okay, because I didn't hate it, but I really didn't love it. And I might as well just replace it with something. So some atmospheric black metal you guys might really like. Cosmic Church's Elistes, I believe. This is a band that disbanded quite a few years ago, and they only had like 3 albums to their name, but this is one of them, and it's fantastic. The atmosphere is very gripping. It's an over hour long, but it's never really boring. The riffs are all pretty inventive. The vocals are really nice, wretched, really show up in the mix. The production, some might say, is a little too high fidelity for black metal to be properly appreciated, but I think it's still effective. I think it's kind of a unique album. It actually does feel a little bit like a Altar of Plagues, but not quite that much against the grain. Also, hey, Ashes Against the Grain, Agalok, that's a decent album too. we want to check that out. But it doesn't really feel like black metal to me, so I'm going to kind of keep it away. And up next is Navaller, self-titled. This is Have a Nice Life's second album. Have a Nice Life, the post-punk, shoegaze, doomgaze, if you will, band. I love putting all these labels on them, kind of just to mess with people, to be honest with you. But if you love their electronic drum sound and you love their drones, then come on down, because Navaller is all that stuff. This whole thing feels like you're staring at someone from a closet, and that person is like half decayed, and that person is it's just someone you should have gotten rid of a long time ago, but you can't bear to remove the body, and it's been too long since you saw the body, so now it's even worse to look at it, so you think you're just going to leave it there. But you swear at night you hear it talking and muttering to itself. But it's just a punched over body. How does it do that? If that little bit of imagery doesn't evoke something interesting to you, then I don't know what will. But this thing is a mess. And it's a mess in the best way possible. Someone on Rate Your Music said this was overproduced. Impossible. This thing sounds terrible. Not only is it horrifying, but it's got that really classic, if you like songs by Have a Nice Life, like Hunter, that are swamped to death in the production department, like you can't even decipher what's going on, then you're gonna like this. The song Let Them Eat Blood literally reaches Leviathan levels of hate and aggression in terms of an ambient track. That's just an ambient track, and yet it feels like someone's like grabbing your throat and like twisting. But slowly, they're not strong enough to, but it's sick. The tones are all amazing here. Like, it's super gritty, and yet it's extra bass. The guitars, it sounds like they're moaning from underneath the floorboards. This thing is ghostly, haunting, it's horrifying. Listen to it right now, and everyone's sleeping on it. Absolutely don't sleep on it. It's an outsider black metal project. It's black metal for people that don't normally make black metal, but they do appreciate it a whole lot, and because of that, you get something so unique and awesome. And if you want to be that kind of person that's like, oh, it's not real black metal, I don't even know what you're coming at here, because just because they're an outsider to the scene doesn't make they're making something soulless and garbage. It means they're making something amazing, actually, because their own instrumental palette is thrown in, and it's given tremolo, it's given the wretched vocals. It's a bit like Sortsend, which is a band we'll get to. Yeah, it's great. Absolutely check it out. And after that, we get Drowning the Light with Catacombs of Blood. I love Drowning the Light. This is a sort of vampiric black metal album where you get a very lonely feeling with some raw production. And this is one of two projects this year where I think the raw production actually isn't perfect. It just kind of nullifies the effectiveness of the riffs and the vocals a little bit, and it kind of just compresses it a bit too much. All the sounds kind of just blend together a little too much, but it's still very lonely. There are like a few piano tracks on here that are this really isolated sound. Sounds like an old upright piano, and it's a haunting stuff, and it's really emotional. The vocals are raspy and airy, but unfortunately the mic peaks with all of the plosives. If you guys don't know what plosives are when I use the P consonant too many times, or K, because extra air, so it peaks the microphone. You might be hearing it right now. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? That's why I have a pop filter. So if you ever wondered why you can't see my chin half the time, it's because my camera's bad. But the other reason is because I use this. I think the atmosphere is very unique, and overall, this album is very solid. It's just, it probably could have been cut a track or two, and then it would be a better experience. But I do give this a good. But, I'll replace that with an album that got popular a couple years ago. Cenotaph's Monte Verita, I believe. It's good. Slightly LARPing, Atmo Black. Riffs go crazy. The clean vocals are normally pretty good, actually, and the riffs are all very engaging. It is modern atmospheric black metal, so it is a little bit overproduced, like probably another album I'm going to mention in one of these replacements at some point, but I still think it's something you guys should listen to. And after that, if you don't want something overproduced, you won't get it here. Zegrin, Everything Dies. I'm not going to include this as a JPEG because it is a giant black box in the sky with 3 bodies hanging from it, being hung. Here's the thing about this album, because I didn't know much about it until I heard it. If you like Revenant Marquis, you're gonna like Zegrin. It's pretty similar. It is absolutely haunting, though. It's terrifying. This thing is very slept on, but unfortunately every single port of this record is terrible. So my experience was awful, but something within me was compelled to want to check it out again at some further point, because I could tell the riffs sounded all right. The vocals were very haunting. The drumming was actually pretty eclectic. I heard, because the drumming is like the main thing you could hear on these really low volume versions that you hear on these YouTube ports that honestly suck, which means maybe I'll fork over the money and buy a copy of this thing, but I could tell what was going into this was good. So while my experience wasn't great, I encourage you guys to wait on this thing until it drops because I can tell everything a part of it was good, especially the drumming, and the vocals were fantastic too. Just the thing was winding over and over again, and it was pretty monotonous as an album, but the atmosphere built was unmistakable. It was pretty horrifying. So I give this another great. And after that, we have Omega by Azaghal. If you needed a break from the classic normal things that make black metal kind of normal, and you wanted something a little more on the side of Satanic Warmaster, but a little higher production, this is what you're getting here. Riff City, very thrashy, very intense. And it's very angry, and the vocals are exceptional here. And the production's just decently gritty, and the whole thing here, honestly, pretty standard, but it's just excellent in the way it's portrayed. The songwriting is great, and the energy is really the appeal here. The gas pedal is never stepped away from for even a moment. So for that, I give this a great. And after that, we have something very different with Beketh Nazimu, I believe, with De Svarta Reterna. This is a bitter, raw, completely ambient black metal record. Pretty different from Paysage d'Hiver if you think that's going to be exactly like that, because it's got these long, winding winter synth segments that wind into black metal segments in this sort of grand movement. And I mess with it so hard. And this is a band that actually has released quite a few demos and albums since this, so I'm probably going to have to check them out at some point in the future, but I don't really know where to get into them. So if you guys have any recommendations for this band, let me know down below because I don't know where to start. The guitars sound amazing. They got some excellent distortion and a little bit of reverb. They sound great. It's cathartic and it's super interesting. And the whole thing is just this meditative experience that I recommend for everybody. So I'm going to give this another great. And up next, another band's who's popular with their less popular album. This is Emperor with 9 Equilibrium. This thing is too progressive for me, and the clean vocals suck, and the production is really underwhelming in general. I don't love Emperor as much as other people do. I've always found something about their sound to be not as amazing. It's because probably they're not as raw as other bands. But this album here is still a bit symphonic, but I don't think the textures are as intricately detailed as the previous albums. But it's the emotion here. I feel like there's just less passion. Sure, it's more progressive. Sure, it's a little harder to play. But if your melodies don't match up, does it really matter? Songs like Eye of Icarus do have clean Viking-style vocals, which get a lot of flack, but just because I listen to Enslaved's early albums means that I don't want to criticize them as much because I know there's worse. But the atmosphere is not as much there. But I can't deny that some of these riffs are pretty excellent, and also it's Ihsahn, so his vocals are great, and really everyone in the band is talented. So I'll give this a good. But let's replace that with Sargeist, Satanic Black Devotion. I didn't love Let the Devil In when I heard it last year, but this one here is a riff fest. And it is pretty standard sounding black metal, but I can't knock it because it's just so energetic and there's a little bit of ambience that works super well. The atmosphere is really set. I love it. And after that, we have Moon Citadel with Night's Scarlet Symphonies. This is a lightly vampiric thing. A lot of people recommend their demo, but I decided to check out their full length this year. And in terms of symphonic black metal, doesn't get much better than this. Seriously, it's like the most grim and cult symphonic black metal I could find. And normally symphonic black metal is the weakest, but it rocks hard. Some of these riffs feel a bit like Inquisition, but you're probably wondering why is it so good? It's because it's Finnish. But yeah, another great Finnish album. It's great. Check it out. And to end today, we have Beherit's Drawing Down the Moon. This is a re-listen. This is sort of a war metal album, but a lot of people kind of call it more black metal just because of the ambient stuff. And I know I've mentioned Archgoat actually having a lot of ambience for a war metal band, but they just balance it super well. They're a standard war metal band that slows down when needed to. Their riffs do have enough variety, and they never really fall into any specific little pitfall that a lot of bands do. But Beherit here is another one of those classic war metal bands, and this one, they combine sort of ritual ambient stuff. A lot of spacey textures are going all around here. And is it tied together perfectly? I don't know about that. Think of it a little bit like Sarcophago, where the punky nature kind of comes out of nowhere, even though there's a lot of driving passion behind the whole thing, and it's Riff City, and it's really grim and serious. And then it's got the sample of the dude on the toilet at the very end, and it kind of pulls you out of the experience, and you're like, why'd you do that? But you're kind of missing the point there, because They were going for this punky attitude and just translated into this new thing that was second wave of black metal. But here it's kind of doing the same thing here. Even though they're doing caveman riffs for a little bit of this, but admittedly they have more technicality than a lot of war metal bands out there. But for war metal, this is the most subdued war metal album, but I do still kind of consider it war metal, even though this album cover does not portray that. But the ambient sections are pretty cool. There are a lot of slower riff portions that are pretty interesting as well. Is it ultimately consistent? I don't know about that, but I think every song in here is pretty fantastic. It's oddly crafted, but you're not going to find anything else quite like this. And for what it does, it's effective, so I do give it a grade. And that's another 15. We're 45 albums out of 60 done, and I'm happy to say with 5 minutes under a previous recording, so that's pretty awesome. But I wonder how you guys are coping with Nothing But Black Metal November this year. How are you guys liking it? How are you guys liking your albums? What are you guys checking out? Are you checking out anything good? I don't know what you're listening to, but let me know. How do you feel about the albums I've been talking about? But that's about it. Social media in the description down below. I'd appreciate it. Like and subscribe. Any comments, questions, or concerned, comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys have to say about this. But that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good day. Bye.